BBC One, followed by Newscast in an hour.
Ban smoking one day, scrap A-levels, eventually replace most of high-speed rail with local transport projects across the country at some point in the future. Will all this help or hinder Rishi Sunak's chances of winning the next general election? To discuss all that, we're in the West Midlands city of Wolverhampton. Its 3 constituencies are all very much up for grabs at the next election, with very small majorities, one held by Labour, the other 2 by the Conservatives. But in a place where every voice and vote will really count, our audience, as always, reflects the electoral picture across the country. Welcome to Question Time. On our panel in a week of big transport announcements, we have Richard Holden, a government transport minister. Having previously worked as a special advisor, he became the first Conservative MP for North West Durham in 2019. From Labour, Jonathan Ashworth is Shadow Paymaster General, who will play a central role in his party's general election strategy, which is already underway, I'm sure. He's previously shadowed health and work and pensions. Emma Dabiri is a writer, academic and broadcaster. Her 4 books, including her latest, Disobedient Bodies, discuss power structures, race and her own upbringing in Dublin. She's fronted numerous documentaries and writes for a variety of newspapers and magazines, from Vice to The Guardian. Richard Walker is executive chair of Iceland Food Stores. He's also been a Conservative supporter who wanted to stand as an MP until last weekend, when he surprisingly quit the party, saying it's out of touch with business, the environment and everyday people. And Tony Parsons started out working life as a journalist at the NME, followed by spells at the Mirror and Telegraph. He now has a column in The Sun on Sunday. He's written dozens of novels, his most recent called Who She Was. Good evening, welcome to our panel, welcome to our audience here in Wolverhampton, great to see you. Welcome to you at home as well. Don't forget, you can always watch the programme, catch up with it on BBC Sounds once the programme has gone out. And I thought I'd just mention it, it's the least interesting thing in the programme, but in case you're wondering, I broke my hand and I've got the remnants of a black eye because I fell off a horse. And that's all there is to say about that. Now, the question tonight, that's the most interesting thing. And of course, our panellists do not know what the questions are, though I'm sure they would like to. Let's hear our first from Jazz Chapper.
Has backing out of the high-speed rail extension helped or hindered the Conservative Party's chances of winning the next election?
So this was the big announcement, much trailed, obviously, the big announcement yesterday from the Prime Minister. Has it helped or hindered staying in government, Richard Holden?
Well, I don't think it's about whether or not we stay in government. I think it's about the fundamentals of the project. And the fundamentals of this project have changed.
Hang on, you think it's nothing to do with appealing to the electorate?
I think it's about...
It's nothing to do with politics at all?
I think it's about trying to make the right long-term decisions, actually. And just to go to the broader point behind Jazz's question is, I think the fundamentals of this project have changed. We've seen the COVID pandemic totally shifted business travel. We're only seeing around 50 to 60% of business travel on many of the intercity lines we were before. The war in Ukraine has caused huge upticks in inflation at the supermarket, and that's about 3 times the levels you're seeing at the supermarket in the construction sector, which means that the benefit to cost ratio for the overall project is now significantly below where it was before. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is, well, you could say we don't change it at all because it's embarrassing to change big projects like this. That would be the short-term political thing. Or you could think it's still the right thing to do. But I think we've got to do the right thing, which is say the fundamentals of this have clearly changed. And the question now is whether you press ahead, Jazz, with the project as it is, or whether you say instead we'll spend the £36 billion we would have spent on HS2, on other projects which are more likely to deliver bigger benefits for people right across the country. And I think that's the right thing to do. And I think the Prime Minister's taken a difficult decision, which has been widely criticised for. But I think it's the right long-term decision for the country because I think that the fundamentals have changed. And I think the easiest thing to do for short-term political opportunism would not have been take that criticism and instead stick with the project. But I think he's taken the right long-term choice in the interest of the country.
And can we just talk about some of these new projects? Because, for example, one of the suggested projects, which is very near your constituency, the Leamside line, which would run from Gateshead to County Durham, that closed. It was in Network North, this big announcement that was going to happen, and then it was taken out today, and so now it's not happening.
No, so
When you say no, that is true, isn't it?
Just to provide clarity on this, what's happened is instead of giving this money to the HS2 project, it's going instead to various different things. One is rail.
No, let's talk about this lean sideline. Let's talk very specifically about that. On Wednesday, the document that the Prime Minister was talking about said it was going to be built. Today, it's no longer in the document and isn't necessarily going to be built.
Well, so what's happened is what we've done is put a good chunk of that money in what's known as City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlements. That's the money that the mayors get, whether it's here in the West Midlands with Andy Street or the new mayoral authority, and it's going to be a brand new mayoral authority from next year.
So it'll be up to the mayor whether it gets built.
But crucially, Fiona, what we've actually done is we've said that at the moment that pot for 2022 to 2027 is around £600 million, I think, off from memory for the North East. That's going to go up to 1.2 billion. And with the extra money going in from the ending of the HS2 project, they'll go to around £1.8 billion.
So why was the Prime Minister saying, yes, it was going to be built, he put it in the document, today he took it out of the document, so it'll actually be up to the local mayor?
Because we don't know whether the local mayor's going to want to do the entire project as heavy rail, if they want it to go ahead, or whether they'll do part of it as a metro extension, from the Tyne and Wear Metro Gateshead extension, or whether they'll do it as a mixture of different projects. So I think it's right, when we're doing devolution, that if we're going to give that money, and we're basically trebling the money for the next 5-year period for the CRSTS funding, we give that decision-making power to the local mayor.
Of course, that is not how it was announced yesterday, as you know. Jonathan Ashworth.
Oh, it's a fiasco, isn't it? A complete and utter fiasco. Billions of pounds of taxpayers' money thrown away. Costs out of control. By the way, who was the finance minister who was supposed to be keeping a grip on these costs? Rishi Sunak, when he was in the Treasury, in the same way he blew a load of money on dodgy COVID loans and dodgy PPE in the pandemic as well. And now what we got yesterday was Rishi Sunak saying, we've got all these new projects across the country. But they're all projects he's announced before and never delivered on. Dualling of the A1, it was announced in 2010. The Doncaster to Darrington A1 announced before. The Shipley bypass announced in 2018. Blythe Relief announced in 2018. Bradford Station was scrapped by Boris Johnson in 2021, reinstated by Liz Truss in 2022, scrapped by Rishi Sunak later in 2022, and now apparently reinstated by Rishi Sunak. If they cannot build this train from London to Manchester, how on earth can you expect anyone to believe you're going to build any of these other projects? It's an absolute shambles, and you are taking the British public for fools.
Now, John, I've got to ask you, and the Labour leader was talking about it today, lots of people, there are many critics of HS2, but there are quite a lot of people who did want it built. Labour is not committing to building it.
Well, they've just taken a wrecking ball to it. So we can't commit to reverse that when they've taken a wrecking ball to this project. But do we support all these other projects? Well, we supported them on the umpteen previous times they've been announced. But the question is, their position is, when it was put to them, these are re-announcements. You know what the Conservatives said? This is an actual quote from the Conservatives yesterday. They said, on all these other projects, they were the empty promises of the past. It's their promises. I suppose that's the same category as the 40 hospitals they never built, but promised us we were going to get as well. So the reality is they are now telling us that they're going to do things that they previously said they were lying to us about, because they've cancelled another big thing, which it turns out they were lying about then, and now expects us to believe us on this. It's an absolute shambles.
Well, look, let me ask you, what would you commit to building?
Well, we have got
the general election's not really that far off.
Well, first of all, we can't reverse this commitment because of the money that has been spent and the wrecking ball that they have now taken to this project. We, of course,
what would you commit to building?
We, of course, support these various different projects they've announced, but I'm absolutely very sceptical that they'll never get built under this lot. And, of course, as we go to a general election, when we know the full picture with the public finances, we will outline our plans. But you won't see us making irresponsible, unfunded spending commitments, because we know what happens when governments do that. It leads to turmoil on the markets and people's mortgages going up, like happened under the Conservatives a year ago.
Lots of hands up. Let me have you. The woman there, yes.
Yeah, I think the Prime Minister tells us that he's making long-term decisions for the benefit of the country. And we travel around on railway network that was built by the Victorians, and So I fail to see how cancelling a high-speed rail link is actually a long-term decision for the future of the country.
OK. Man here at the front.
I'd just like to say nobody asked us whether we want this fast train. The only people I know want to get to London quicker is the Wolves supporters on the match day. And they'd like a much faster train getting out again after we lost. But nobody consulted us, you know. You just spent all this money. And I don't know anybody who wants to be up. You know, we're quite intelligent. We get an earlier train if we want to be up there sooner.
The man at the very back. The man at the very back.
Wasn't the HS2 actually a Labour initiative back in 2008 and a concept in 2009? And isn't it part of the kind of the out of London initiative that they had that the BBC followed through and went to Media City, as with ITV and Channel 4? So my question, my thoughts are on this, that basically, if you look at the statistics from the Office of Rail and Road for the last year, 1.4 billion rail journeys were taken in the last year, financial year. Out of that, 1 billion were in the south, east and in London, which leaves 400 million for the rest of the country. So isn't this a kind of a Labour folly that the Conservatives inherited and now, fortunately, have put a stop to?
You better answer that, Jonathan.
No, I will answer it. It was a Labour policy at the end of the last Labour government, and one that was thoroughly embraced by David Cameron, George Osborne and Boris Johnson. And in fact, if you look at Twitter, there's various very prominent Conservatives, including Jeremy Hunt, embracing it only in the last couple of years or so. The idea behind it wasn't just so people could get to match day to go and watch get to go and watch Wolves play in London quicker, as our gentleman here points out. It was also the building of another line would have freed up capacity on existing lines for freight, which is why you would get a lot of Conservative politicians saying that this extension was good for business and good for investment. Okay. Of course, they've pulled the plug on it now and left us with this complete shambles.
Richard Walker.
Yeah, no, I believe the lady's exactly right. In fact, I agree with that Tory slogan, long-term thinking, of course. And if we really want a change candidate, how radical would it be to actually commit to a long-term infrastructure project? That would be revolutionary. But of course, that's not just happened. I think, look, I've never been a fan of HS2 originally, but now we're doing it. To half do it up from London, I don't know why they didn't start it from Manchester and go down, but that would only drive regional inequality, to my mind. And I think from a business perspective, my issue is that this just blows trust and credibility in the government, because who's going to believe them, right? So apparently they're going to waste a couple of billion on things that now are a waste of money, buying all these land and property and consultants, etc. But who's going to believe them about the northern connections? I mean, I'd love that. I think HS2, now we're halfway, needs to be completed. I'd actually like both, but I think the public mood is that we're going to get neither. And certainly, from a business perspective, the government, in this respect, have lost kind of credibility and trust. And those contractors who are going to invest in the northern networks, I mean, I'll tell you now, they'll add a big price premium onto these proposed projects because they won't happen, will they?
So, Richard, the question from Jazz is has backing out of the high-speed rail extension helped or hindered the Conservative Party's chances of winning a next general election? Now, you very much supported the Conservatives. You wanted to be a Conservative MP. That was your fervent wish, in your words. Doesn't sound like they wanted you to be an MP, and you have now decided no longer to support them. Is that sour grapes, or is that actual conviction?
Well, I think, you know, I think it became increasingly clear that they don't want people like me with real-world experience and genuine opinions of my own. But I'm not willing to wear a gag to bag a seat. And, you know, over recent months, it's become clearer to me that they're drifting out of touch with business, out of touch with the environment, and also out of touch with the needs of everyday people like my customers.
I think that's an absolute, you know, I mean, in fairness.
Why don't you want him?
I mean, if Rich, I think.
What's wrong with him?
I think it's.
Go on, he's sitting right next to you.
Everybody, I'm sure, has seen the letter that Richard wrote to the wrote to the Prime Minister.
I know he never responded, but maybe
I'm sure
it.
not everybody has seen the letter, actually. But
Well, if they
basically,
haven't, I
Richard
think-
wrote a letter to the Prime Minister saying that it was his fervent wish to be a Conservative MP, and he very much wanted to be one.
Well, that was the whole point, because I was banging my head against a
Okay,
brick
so why
wall.
don't you want him?
No, I think, I just found it slightly surprising that it was only after, he was after a specific seat, and it was only after the selection process for that seat started and he wasn't on it that he seems to have done this volte
Okay.
pass.
Are you going to switch to Labour, Richard?
No, I'm going to take a breath, and I'm going to
Do you
see
want
what... Well, this is like blind date or first date.
I've got you here.
Well, I mean, I think, to be frank, if Richard wanted to join the Labour Party, a man who's a senior business figure in this country, who employs, I think, 30,000 people or so in shops all across the country, if somebody of Richard's calibre wanted to come to the Labour Party, we would welcome him with open arms. And I think the fact that he says the Conservative government is completely out of touch with the British public speaks volumes. And to be honest, Richard, for you to attack him like that is pretty cheap. He's a senior business person who employs lots of people across the country. Don't attack him. Ask him why he's deserting.
Well,
Listen, I'm not going to make a whole thing about Richard's future career. Well, he's got a career already running Iceland. Let's get back to the main question, which is, remember that? Has backing out of the high-speed rail extension helped or hindered the Conservative Party's chances of winning the next election? Emma?
Yeah, so I think what has hindered their chances of winning the next election, or actually I think one of my primary concerns is the state of public discourse at the moment. I think one of its prevailing characteristics is obfuscation and misinformation. And with the high-speed train, you know, the speed was never really the primary thing. It was about building capacity. And I would strongly disagree with what you were saying. The fundamentals have not changed. Somebody referenced the Victorian era. So a century ago, Britain had 32,000 kilometres of track. It now has 16,000 kilometres of track. 70% of the delays that I'm sure we've all experienced on the train are caused by congestion because there is freight, there is long distance and shorter commuter journeys all happening on the same limited amount of track. So primarily, we just need there just needs to be far greater capacity. There needs to be more tracks built. And I think there's so much kind of, we have this project and that project, and just kind of distraction techniques, but the fundamentals have not changed. There needs to be greater track capacity, and that should be relatively uncontroversial and should be relatively easy to do. I don't know why the kind of simplest things seem so impossibly challenging to this country. I mean, the country is falling apart.
Tony, do you agree?
Do I agree the country's falling apart? I think it often feels as though not much is working the way it should. But in answer to your question, I think that Rishi Sunak has increased his chances of winning the general election. I think that not making that announcement in Manchester this week would have been the easiest thing in the world. I think a prime minister's first instinct is to kick that can down the unbuilt railway track, and I think it would have been so easy for Sunak to say, you know, I know there's a lot of talk and I know there's a lot of speculation, but we need to reflect dearly on this. And I think he is, in many ways, you know, Rishi is, I know we've had many, many Tory MPs over the last 13 years, but I think he is different from the rest of them. I think that over the last week, you've seen that difference. It's why Boris and Cameron are going, tweeting furiously, you know, that they disagree with this decision. I think he took the tough decision. I think he took, maybe it makes him more unpopular, I don't know, but I think he took the right decision because the money that has been spent on this runaway gravy train is absolutely obscene. The British taxpayer have been taken for complete mugs on this. The latest figure that I heard for the completion of HS2 was 180 billion. But every estimate is too low.
I've heard 100. I'm not sure where you got 180 from, but OK.
You heard 100?
Yes. I mean, in fact, nobody knows.
How many houses can you build for 100 billion or 180 billion? I just think it was a vanity project. Yes, it was a new Labour vanity project, but enthusiastically supported by Tories. And in the end, although they're looking at these figures, they're looking at the obscene waste of money, that just the limitless money that's been spent on this project. And nobody had the bottle until Rishi Sunak to pull the plug. And the fact that the optics looked excruciating that he did it in Manchester, that it came to a head in Manchester. You wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't write a movie like that because it would seem too impossible. But so I think it's a long shot. The bookies, who are the greatest political pundits in the world, have still got Labour odds on to win the next election. But I think he's shortened the odds, in answer to your question.
Here's the woman here in the front.
Good evening. We're talking about £36 billion in new projects and infrastructure, but how much out of that is going to go for penalties to cancel the existing contracts? What is actually the real figure that we're talking about? Because no one's mentioned that. All we've heard is 36 billion, but what actually is a real figure that will go back into the country in the new infrastructure?
Let me get a couple more questions and then I'll come back to you. Yes, the man there in the dark top, yeah.
It's more of a statement than a question. I think it has backfired. It seems like Prime Minister was forced to make a decision or announcement because it was leaked through the press. I mean, there was a piece of paper apparently captured indicating that there was a decision to cancel, and therefore it was forced in that sense to announce the decision that's already been made. That's how I took the decision.
Okay.
And it has backfired.
And let's hear from the woman in... Yes.
As a result of this decision, I'd like to know what is going to happen to the poor people whose lives have been unimaginably impacted by this now aborted system. Because when you read about the cases of people's lives, I mean...
So you mean people who've had to sell their homes, or whose homes have been compulsorily purchased?
I'm not aware. Have they been compensated, or are they going to be in any way for what's happened to them as a result of this monumental mess-up?
Let me take one more point from the man here in the front with the glasses and the sweatshirt. Let me just get the microphone to you. There you go.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Tony said. I think it was a complete and utter vanity project. Sunak should be praised for finally saying this has got to stop. I come from Somerset originally. You wouldn't get a bus in Somerset, let alone a train. So finally, let's stop it, get rid of this London-centric thinking and spread it across the country.
OK. So, Richard, briefly, I'm going to take some other questions as well. So the woman here in the front is saying how much that 36 billion is actually going to be spent, and what about the people who sold their farms, sold their homes, all the rest of it? What happens to them now?
So I'll pick on that lady's question first. So if anybody who's sold their property is under CPO or under the threat of compulsory purchase, they will have first refusal on getting that property back if they want it. There has already been compensation paid to those people, and there's also other compensation schemes around those more broadly affected in the local area. So I hope that addresses that lady's question. To the lady in the front, the 36 billion is after the costs have been taken out. So basically, the overwhelming majority of money that's been spent on HS2 so far is on the section to Lichfield, and to Curzon Street in Birmingham. That's the overwhelming majority. The lady's quite right though, there's around £2 billion in sunk costs for the northern elements of the project, which are unrecoverable. But the £36 billion, that is going to transport schemes right across the country. The mayor in the West Midlands will be seeing a very substantial uptick, for example, in his City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement, which you'll see going forwards. But I really, and Jonathan comes a lot of, fury on this sort of thing. But I do remember that when Jonathan was actually in the Treasury for 5 years as an advisor, the PFI projects, which...
Private finance initiatives. £50 billion. £50 billion.
Really? Is this really what your defence is of this fiasco?
£50 billion of the spending. £50 billion worth of capital was got for £300 billion of the spending.
It was the Tory government that introduced PFI in the first place.
It was not the Tory government which signed the contracts.
Don't shout over each other.
Contracts which were signed while you were there in the Treasury and are still being unwound to this very day. No apology from the Labour Party about PFI projects.
The most pathetic defence of this fiasco I've ever heard. You really are out of touch.
Right. We're going to end this discussion there and move on. But before we do, I just want to tell you where we will be next week. Next week we will be in London, where we will have on our panel, we don't always know exactly who the panel is in advance, but we've got a good heads up for next week. We'll have the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. We'll have Mylene Klass, and we'll have Piers Morgan on our panel. There's always a kind of... and others.
I think this is feisty.
So, yeah. So stay tuned. Anyway, so do come along and be part of the audience. You can follow the instructions on the screen, the Question Time website. Come along and be part of our audience. We'd love to see you. The week after that, we are in Lisburn in Northern Ireland. So you can apply to either of those. And incidentally, if you would like a picture of yours to feature here, showing where we are, because we're doing this every week now, just to show as we move around the country, get in touch. The address is on the screen, and we'd love to see your pictures. OK, let's move on to another subject. Sarah Roberts, whereabouts are you? Right, let's hear what you've got to say.
In 1968, the MP for Wolverhampton South West was ostracised by his party for his views on immigration. Should Suella Braverman receive the same treatment?
Right, so Sarah, you are referring to Enoch Powell, who was a local MP here. His Rivers of Blood speech was made in 1968, and let me just quote some of it. It was in response to the introduction of the then proposed Race Relations Act. He said, "We must be mad, literally mad as a nation, to be permitting the annual inflow of some 50,000 dependents." And then he said, as I look ahead, I'm filled with foreboding. Like the Roman," he's quoting from Virgil, from Aeneid, "I seem to see the river Tiber foaming with much blood." So that was the phrase that he used. This week, Suella Braverman talked about her own parents coming over to the United Kingdom. And she said, "The wind of change that carried my own parents across the globe in the 20th century was a mere gust compared to the hurricane that is coming." And a number of people have picked up on the use of that word, hurricane. Is it a fair comparison?
Yeah, I think it would be... I don't see how you couldn't make the comparison. And the use of the word hurricane, as I would pronounce it, is not incidental. It's very intentional, and it's very much like there was an article in the Atlantic in 1994 called "The Coming Anarchy" by Robert Kaplan, which promised hordes of West African men that were the coming anarchy, that were going to swamp the shores of Western nations. And actually, that was a very influential article that is apparently one of the reasons that President Clinton took so long to intervene in the war in Rwanda, interestingly enough, to mention Rwanda. But those hordes of men, the hurricane, it's very, very similar language. And it's also the type of language that you start to see being used about people, language that dehumanizes people, that presents people as a threat, makes it incredibly easy to commit acts of barbarism against those people. And it's often the type of language that you see being used before a genocide starts. It's absolutely, it's so sinister, and it's so shocking that that type of language is being used by members of our government today.
So Enoch Powell was sacked from the Shadow Cabinet for those comments. So Sarah's question is, should Suella Braverman receive the same treatment? Tony?
I completely agree with Emma that the language and the use of hurricane is dehumanising, and I think that was a mistake. I think it's, in answer to your question, I think it's very unlikely she's going to be ostracised by the Tory party, because her speech was one of the big hits of the Tory party. Personally, I think the general thesis of what she was saying was not that different from what President Macron said in France the week before. Macron said France cannot embrace the misery of the world. And he was saying that there are more people on this planet who would like to come and live in our Western nations than we can ever possibly accommodate. And I think that the language, essentially, Braverman made the same speech. I mean, she talked about this being a generous and tolerant country, and a generous and tolerant country to her family when they arrived. And I think she's absolutely right. It is a generous and a tolerant country. But when we use a word like hurricane, then we don't seem generous and tolerant. We seem as though we're dehumanising people. And I think that with this subject, I think you have to be very careful. I don't think you can play to the gallery. I don't think you can play just to your core audience. I think you have to be very careful about the language you use. And I think that she made a mistake with the word hurricane. But the central thesis of what she was saying was absolutely no different to what Macron said, which is we're going to have to, at some point, we're going to have to, you know, how many women and girls are suffering under the Taliban? 20 million. We can't possibly give a home to all of them, although we may wish to do so It's impossible.
Can I just add something really quickly? It just completely obscures the economic and political reasons that people are fleeing the countries and the neoliberal policies that make life in these countries such that people have to come here. And I really, really feel like we need to be extremely vigilant, because people are being manipulated into thinking that migrants pose a threat, when really the real threat is posed by us leaving the European Court of Human Rights, which they're using the whole, the small boats policy, the fact that that's, kind of deemed illegal. The government is using that to say that they might leave the European Court of Human Rights. By starting, with targeting the most vulnerable in society and dehumanising them, what we would be allowing to happen would be for the government to actually erode human rights in ways that would mean that we were all increasingly vulnerable and left without protection. So they start with the most vulnerable, but they're coming for you unless you're part of the ruling class.
All right, let's Commander. Yeah.
I think that Suella Braverman has done more to damage the Tory re-election campaign than anybody else. I find most of what she says pure evil.
Okay. Man here.
Every time there's a general election coming, we have this rhetoric being pumped out. It's been going on for the last 20 years, at least I can remember. But the question here with Braverman, with invasion and millions of people coming and all these issues, is a pure distraction from the real issues people have to face on a daily basis. Waiting list in NHS not being talked about. People using food banks, people going to school hungry, extreme poverty by the 13 years of austerity, which have impacted on all these factors, and now it's a pure distraction from the real issues that people need to deal with.
So, Richard Holden, Suella Braverman's use of the word, I call it hurricane, it's hurricane. I think I must be pronouncing it
I'm from Ireland, though, so I pronounce things.
The use of the word hurricane, would you use that word?
Look, there's no comparison between what Enoch Powell said and what Suella Braverman said, and the reason for that is, well, there's a really strong reason for that, actually, and that's because we are a proud multi-ethnic country today. The Prime Minister is from ethnic minority background, Foreign Secretary is, the Home Secretary herself is, the Energy Secretary is.
This is the danger of representation politics.
Can I just say...
Do not wheel that out. Don't insult our intelligence.
OK, let's take Richard Arthur. I should just say the reason we took that question with that specific comparison is because so many people asked it and made that comparison. So we thought, in fairness to the number of people that asked it, we should let that question come out. Do you support the use of Suella Braverman's language?
Look, it's the language that she's chosen to use in this context.
Would you use the word hurricane?
Well, I think it basically highlights, as Tony said earlier on, the fact that there are so many people around the world who are wanting to move for all sorts of reasons. You can totally understand why they would want to move, but there are so many people that the West could not take those numbers of people.
And would you use that word?
Well, I mean, it's a sign of the size. What she's doing is highlighting the size of the problem.
It's not going to answer.
So would you use the word?
What she's doing is trying to highlight.
You're not answering the question. Would you use the word hurricane? Yes or no?
Well, I've not used it now, but I think
no, you wouldn't use it. Is that what you're saying?
All she's doing is highlighting the size of.
Am I getting answered the question or not? No. Would you use the word hurricane?
All she's doing.
Just say yes or no.
All she's doing is highlighting the size of the problem. It's not how I would have described it, but she's highlighting.
Okay.
What she's trying to do is highlight the size of the problem that the world faces at this moment in time.
You've answered. In fairness, you've answered. It's not a word you would use. Richard Walker.
Sarah, yeah, I mean, I think she should be sacked, but she won't be, because the rhetoric was very deliberate, designed to whip up the base, lurching to a more kind of populist, hard-right stance, given their low poll ratings. I think, as Emma has said, language really matters. It is very, very important. And my concern with that speech is that it was designed to whip up fear and antipathy and division. And I don't think any of that is helpful. We've relied on immigration for thousands of years. We will for many more thousands of years. Many organisations, many businesses, and as we've heard, indeed the Conservative Party absolutely rely on immigration. It's a very important thing for our society. But to sow that division and fear is not helpful. And that's not the sort of language that we should be hearing from our political class. We can do better.
Let's hear a little bit more from this. Yes, woman here in the front.
I was wondering if I could ask the Conservative MP a question, please. If you're in a country and you're starving and you're in poverty, would you come over to this country looking for refuge, or would you just, I don't know, if you're that desperate and you're that hungry, what would you do about it?
And I can totally understand the lady's point, and I think we all have immense sympathy for people here across the world. But what I would also say is that, as President Macron, as President Biden, as leaders across the world have said, that there are so many people who would want to move at the moment. That is just not a sustainable way forwards. What we need to do is ensure that the developing world develops even faster. We've seen, actually, over the last 2 decades, more people lifted out of poverty than ever before. I think we need to go further with that. I think we need to have more international trade, more international cooperation on many of these issues. I think we need to get out into the world, and the way to lift these people out of poverty is not to try and pretend that we can have everybody come to any country, particular country in the world, but actually to help develop world economies. And the biggest way to do that is through trade and ensuring that other countries are stable and prosperous.
Jonathan.
I agree with the point that Richard Walker was making a moment ago. She's deliberately courting controversy because she's appealing to what she thinks are the certain instincts of the Tory party base. She's trying to provoke controversy and distract people because she's got nothing to say on knife crime, on the epidemic of violence against women and girls and falling prosecutions, so she's focusing on this and whipping up anger. But what has made me particularly angry as an MP for Leicester is that she crossed the Atlantic and she made a speech about multiculturalism as a failure, and she referenced Leicester, the city where I live, the city where I send my children to school. She said the streets of Leicester and the city of Leicester shows you that multiculturalism has failed. Well, in a couple of weeks' time, in Leicester, all of us, of all faiths and none, will celebrate Diwali. Children in our primary schools will make Diwali lamps. Our streets will sparkle with lights. Children who are lucky enough will enjoy the thrill of the big wheel on the famous Belgrave Road. I'm proud that we will host one of the biggest Diwali events outside of India. And after we've celebrated Diwali, together as one city, we'll celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, Vaisakhi, Ramadan, Eid, and we'll also include people who do not observe any faith as well. So I say to Suella Braverman, I don't know if she watches Question Time, but if she is watching tonight, don't dare attack my city and the people of Leicester and try to use Leicester as a pawn in your game to become the next Tory leader.
I'm going to take another question from Mitchell Humphreys.
Does the panel agree with the Prime Minister's proposal to raise the minimum age for smoking until no one can buy cigarettes legally?
So just in case you're not aware of this, the Prime Minister announced he would put in place a ban to gradually ban smoking by 1 year every year. So assume it takes 4 years to implement. It would mean that someone who's 14 now would not be able to buy cigarettes, because obviously the age will move on and on. So I don't. Who smokes on this panel?
I used to be a smoker.
Right. So Tony, what do you think?
Well, I was a 30 Marlboro a day man. Not the the mild stuff, but the full strength. And what stopped me was watching my father die of lung cancer. And I think that would. And I think a trip to a cancer ward would stop any young smokers from taking up the habit. And I think it'd have a lot more effect than prohibition. I'm not sure prohibition works. I'm not sure.
So do you not agree with this?
I think it's well intentioned, and when you look at the numbers, that okay, the Treasury is going to lose this from the tobacco industry, but the NHS will save this because we won't be treating people that get sick. The numbers make sense. It adds up. But I just think that if I was a little 14-year-old behind the e-bike sheds having my fag today, it'd probably make it seem more glamorous, and I'd feel like a little rebel and a bad boy, even more so. And so that's the attraction.
Even more than the rebel you obviously were.
Yes, absolutely. So I think there's other ways to stop it. I think that it's true that people wish they'd stopped. It's fantastically addictive. It's fantastically addictive. It's really, really tough to stop, and you need a shock to stop. And I'm not sure that legislation is quite enough.
Jonathan?
No, I'll support it, and when the vote comes to Parliament, I will vote in favour of it. Actually, my friend and colleague Wes Streeting, who's our Shadow Health Secretary, he's been talking about this as an idea for some time as well. I think they've implemented it, or they are implementing it in New Zealand. And I've had a bit of a go at Rick Holden tonight, but I'm going to be nice to you, Rick, because I know there are some...
Oh, it's Rick now.
I don't know, but Richard Holden...
It helps with the confusion. You've got me far worse before, so you can go with one of the other.
But, look, you know, I know you've got a lot of Tory MPs who don't support this, so bring the vote, we'll help you get it through, it's good for public health, it will save lives, and we'll help you get that vote through the House of Commons. Let's get on with it.
All right. The man with the blue hair in the front.
If you're on about cigarettes still, if people are going to smoke, they're going to smoke. It's not saying it's a bad idea, but when I used to smoke when I was younger, you know, I used to go, can you get me some cigarettes, and ask someone to get them. So it's a good idea, because obviously a lot of people are dying from lung cancer, but it's finding another alternative, because I think it's a bit of a silly idea, but I'm not saying it's a bad idea.
OK, silly but not bad. I'm not sure I follow you, but OK. Woman at the very back.
Surely, if we're banning, like, cigarettes, people are going to find more ways to bring that, like, illegally, like, import these cigarettes into the country. Like, you see it with, like, banning drugs. People just find sneakier ways to bring things into the country. And I really don't think that putting it into law is going to stop people who are genuinely addicted or just, like, feel a bit like they're just feeling like breaking the law today. It's really not going to stop them from smoking, and it's just going to cause more legal imports and, yeah.
I mean, there will still be people, older people will still be able to... Someone who smokes today, who's 18 and over, will absolutely still be able to smoke. It's bringing the younger cohort in, that's what will be stopped. Yes, a woman here in the front.
I think he's out of touch. I think he needs to look at vaping. That's where the real problem is for young people. It's not cigarettes. I see school children at the bus stops, and I can't even think of the age they are, but they shouldn't even be smoking at all. But vapes are used more with the younger generation than cigarettes, and this has been said publicly on the telly and by other government members. So that's where he needs to tackle it for the younger people. I think the older people, if they've smoked, it's very hard, because it's an addiction at the end of the day. So it's very hard to come off. But you know, if you can, you will. You know, but for younger people, I think it's vaping you need to look at.
Yeah, I'd just like to say something to that. Like, when I was a teenager, which was a long time ago, smoking was, like, so normalised in a way that it doesn't seem to be with teenagers now. But exactly as the numbers of teenagers started to go down, they started to make vapes that were, like, strawberry flavoured and bubblegum flavoured to actually make them appealing to young people. So, yeah, they'll just find a way of kind of creating that addiction somewhere else. But also, I think it's a really weird priority. Like, why is this his priority right now? Do you know what I mean?
So what do you think it should be?
What his priority should be?
Yeah, in terms of public health.
Oh, like funding the NHS? Like me...
Like, you know what you think?
Giving a pay rise to the doctors and nurses. Like, the fact that this smoking ban is like one of his priorities, given what this gentleman at the front was saying about food banks, like just the entrenched, deep poverty, the 500... the figure I have, the amount of people that are on NHS waiting lists, the 500 people that died waiting for ambulances that didn't come last year. Like, maybe focus on those things rather than smoking. Again, it's distraction tactics.
Do you know what's that, Richard? It's a distraction tactic.
Well, I think there's a few things. I think the lady at the front made the point about vaping, and actually that was part of the same announcement. One of the things that the government wants to do is basically look exactly, and you think you're quite right about the flavoured vapes. We need to have a real look at that, and also the single-use ones, which apparently millions a day are going into landfill across the country. So, look, I'm not saying actually that vaping is vaping is better, but we've got to do it in a way which doesn't actually encourage people into doing it, rather than as something as a substitute to get people off smoking. I think that's where we'd like to be. Look, when we raised the age to 18 for when you could buy cigarettes, we found that 30% fall in the people smoking from that age group. And when it's been done in other countries to 21, that's been a 39% fall. So actually, restricting this in this way, I think, is a sensible long-term policy to try and reduce the number of people smoking right across the country. And it's great to have some cross-party support on that as well. But
a distraction tactic is what Emma's saying?
Well, I'd just say, look, 1 in 4 cancers are linked to smoking. That might be a bit of distraction. You know, 17 billion pounds a year spent on the NHS to deal with smoking-related illnesses. Perhaps some people would view that as a distraction. I'd view that as core to what we're wanting to do, which is actually to change public health in order to make it in order to try and reduce some of the pressure on the NHS and also to save lives. Look, I'm a smoker. I think I'm the only smoker on this panel. I wish I'd never started. And I wonder if, in time, if that was more restricted, and also on the point the lady made about vapes, if for some young people starting vaping now, if that wasn't the case for them, whether people wouldn't have started smoking or started vaping in the first place. So I think these are sensible policies heading in the right direction, and I hope they get widespread support from not just this audience but across the country.
OK, let me just hear a couple more points. Yes, the woman here in the front. Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask where the line is. Do we ban alcohol, because that is equally as addictive and causes the same sort of social and health problems that cigarettes do? It's advertised on TV, it's targeted at younger people with Alco Pops, and I just wonder why cigarettes and not alcohol. Is this the start of something bigger?
I think that's a really good question, actually. I think the difference with alcohol is there is no safe amount of smoking that you can do which won't impact your health. I think people can drink alcohol in moderation and it doesn't affect their health in the same way. I think with smoking there just isn't that case. So that's what the reason there's a difference there, and it's similar with hard drugs. Why you would, there's no safe amount of heroin that people can really take. And it's the same argument. So,
Richard Walker, we've got cross-party support for this, which doesn't always happen on this programme, I've got to say, so it's rather unusual. I don't quite know what to make of it. So we've got cross-party support for this. We've got Emma saying it's a distraction tactic.
Yeah, well, and Tony said it was well-intentioned, and I agree. And I think bans can sound very good from a party conference stage. I just worry over in the real world about the enforceability of it. And I say that as a shopkeeper, right? And you all know about the friction on the high street. I don't want to digress too much, but there is an epidemic out there of shoplifting. It's not a victimless crime. And many of my colleagues have to face, frankly, terrifying issues on a daily basis. Now, my worry is the burden of this enforceability, which is an annual ratcheting age increase, will fall on the shopkeeper or the cashier, who is already under pressure, having to deal with a whole plethora of other issues. So I worry about the practical enforceability of it over in the real world.
Because you'll get to a situation where presumably someone, well, no, definitely, if this were to come to fruition, where someone who was 50, say, couldn't buy a pack of cigarettes, but someone who's 51 could, and then presume it's up to the shopkeeper to decide whether they are or they aren't.
Yeah, exactly. And yet again, we get these policies which sound great, but then how do you actually apply it? How do you implement it? Are we going to start IDing? Are we going to start refusing? What about if they get annoyed because someone who's a year older can accept it? I mean, this is the daily reality now on the high street, and it's unacceptable. It's not just in our shops, it's in every shop up and down the high street. And we have a kind of I am deliberately going to go off-piste here, but we have a problem with a lack of police response on these issues as well. And, this isn't just stealing a pack of fags or vodka or whatever. These are violent incidents that are happening on a weekly basis to my staff and to staff up and down the high street, and it's unacceptable.
OK, we've got time for one final question. I'd like to take it from Matthew Caldwell.
Is the government ban on mobile phones in schools just a smokescreen to deflect from the real issues faced by teachers?
Tony?
I think it's a good idea to get the little sprogs to put down their mobile phone. I think we could all use with a few lessons in the glory of I don't think a lot of young people realise there's an off button on those things. I don't think a lot of adults. When was the last time you saw an adult driving down the road staring at their mobile phone? I'm betting it was earlier today. You know, I just think that the tyranny of these things, and all the planned revision to A levels, it's all going to fall apart if little Jimmy's looking at TikTok. So
let me just quote to you then. So the former High Mistress, I guess that's headmistress to you and me, of St Paul's Girls' School, which is a private school, a very high-achieving one. She said, good luck with a ban on mobiles. She said, schools tried to ban mobiles a decade ago, realised the time and energy used to police that policy would be better spent finding ways to integrate this ubiquitous item into teaching and learning, harness the potential of technology, don't ban it. But that's a headmistress's view.
Yeah, well, I think she's saying that they're allowed to have them. She doesn't want them in St Paul's. I'm sure that St Paul's doesn't want mobile phones. Actually, she's saying, can you integrate them into the lessons? I think that St Paul's would probably slide down the scale of academic excellence if it did that. I mean, I think that as parents, as soon as they go up to big school, you want them to have the mobile phone, because now, unlike our own parents, you're kind of relying on having that connection to you. You can't let them get.
But in classroom, you're saying no.
No, absolutely
not. Emma.
Yeah, I think I agree. In that, I totally agree with your point in needing to have that connection, but I think they should just have one of those brick phone, like just a Nokia brick phone, like no smartphone.
Just shame them with it.
Well, no, well, if they all have it, there's no shame. And you can't make that argument, all my friends are on this, because they'll all have the same brick phone, and then their parents can contact them, but they're not just having this corrosive influence. And when I think about how much my own attention has been my own attention span has been impacted by smartphones and social media, but thankfully they weren't introduced into my life until I was a grown adult with a matured brain. And I was a very, very avid reader from a young age, through my teens, through my 20s, and I don't know that I would have been to the extent that I was if I'd been distracted by my phone. I think it's a real danger to young people. It can be.
Can I just, have we got any teachers here, or people who work in schools? Right, let's hear from a couple of you. Yes, the woman at the front here. Yes, what do you think? Do you agree with the ban on mobiles in schools?
I don't know if it will help, but these kids are glued to these things. Yeah. So I really don't know. Integrating it into the classroom, I don't think that's a good idea. I work in a primary school, so most of them probably don't have phones. Sure. But tablets and everything.
Okay.
I don't know, I feel sorry for them, to be honest with you.
Yes, and the other person there's a teacher, yes.
I don't think it's so much in schools, it's a wider debate about their attention spans and their use of mobile phones outside of the school, because doing homework, I don't think they're dedicating enough time outside of the classroom. It's how they're using their phones,
but in terms
phones
of,
at home.
Would you agree with the ban on mobiles in school as a teacher?
They can have a place.
Okay.
So, no.
Not necessarily. Richard Holden?
Well, I think most schools don't allow mobile phones in the classroom, or I've been to some of them.
So why announce a ban then?
Because some of them do, and I think we want to have kids need the best possible start, and if they're distracted in lessons, then that can be a big problem. I think the other big problem for kids, and this is definitely something that's come up in my constituency, is around cyberbullying. So when it used to just be in the classroom, and I'm sure any teachers here will have heard of this, it'll be kids, as part of either WhatsApp chats or group chats, having a go at each other, and if that's carried, if there's no safe space for kids, if they're not safe in every classroom, because there's constantly the distraction and potential for people having a go at them, and that sort of thing. I just think that classrooms are for learning, and I struggle to see a space for where you would require a mobile phone to be part of that within a classroom.
Yeah. The woman there, yes, in the colourful top, yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment that actually forbidden fruit is always the sweetest. There's no point banning, especially in high schools. I'm all for integration. The more you ban, the more they will want to use it, the more they will sneak, the more they will use it in the wrong way. If we make an attempt to integrate it in the learning, I think it will be more use.
Okay, which is what this former headmistress is saying. Richard?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, they're important safety devices for many kids to and from school, of course, and I think a lot of parents are quite supportive of them having them. But in the classroom, I mean, no, absolutely not, as far as I'm concerned. And actually, I mean, in my kids' schools, it's banned, and as Richard said, I think it's banned in most schools anyway, so I didn't really see this as a particularly groundbreaking policy, and certainly something that seems to be common sense. And, you know, maybe it's so the kids can't take pictures of aerated concrete or something. I don't know.
The guy there in the middle. The guy in the middle. Yes, you, sir. Yeah.
It's an interesting time for this to be announced. I'm not sure why at the party conference they didn't speak about more funding into schools when you're seeing about buildings in disrepair. Why was it not mentioned about how much money was going to be put into repairs into these schools that are falling down pretty much?
OK. And the man further forward in the green shirt. Yeah.
Shouldn't we allow individual head teachers to be trusted to be able to control their own schools rather than just do a blanket ban?
Well, actually, what it is government guidance suggesting that schools should do this. I mean, you're saying most schools do it already. And then what the Education Secretary is saying is if schools don't do it, then enforcement might follow.
So, in other words, it will be a ban unless you do what we tell you.
And you think that's wrong?
I don't think it should. I think the head teachers should be trusted to be able to judge their school and their pupils appropriately.
All right, let me just because we're in a very short time, I haven't let Jonathan ask this question. Let me just bring him in.
You just hit the nail on the head. It's guidance. And by the way, the previous Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, do you remember him? He announced this in a big fanfare and got headlines for it. So they've announced this, even though it's guidance, even though most schools do not allow mobile phones in classrooms, and actually they cannot enforce it unless they're going to change the law on it. So it's all to get a headline at Tory party conference and not to focus on the fact that we've got children forced out of schools because the roofs are going to cave in, or there's children who lost the best part of 2 years' worth of schooling and haven't had the investment to catch up. It's just a distraction from the real issues which are impacting school children today.
So you wouldn't be supporting this?
No, I support it, but I'm not falling into the trap of they've announced it and they've announced it before, and it's up to individual head teachers. And most schools do not allow mobile phones in the classroom anyway.
In fairness, some head teachers will welcome strengthened guidance. In order for them to say, look, this is...
Is that what they've told you?
This is the guide... I'm not behind this individual policy, I'm a Transport Minister. But in order to be able to say...
You're in the Cabinet, you're in the Government.
The guide... I'm not in the Cabinet. Not in the Cabinet yet.
But I'm sure this didn't come out of nowhere, or did it?
No, absolutely
not. So you didn't know anything about it?
This will be something which has, obviously been talked about with schools for a long time.
How many schools allow mobile phones?
I think I think there's a reasonable percentage of them that do, Jonathan.
You said most don't.
Around 25%, which I did say most. 25% isn't most. Well, just let me...
Hang on, let's Richard answer.
Rather than constantly having a go at me, Jonathan, Mr. PFI, we all remember what you left the schools with, which is enormous.
We've hardly got any time left, so if you want to answer this question, you better crack on.
And so I was just going to say that sometimes head teachers like the guidance because it really helps them reinforce to parents that this is something that government wants us to do, and it helps them to communicate that message clearly.
OK, I've got time for one more. OK, very quickly.
It seems that there's actually a real consistency across all of these things. I really like the point that Richard made about the real world.
We've got two Richards here. Which one are you talking about?
This Richard.
Richard Walker.
Yeah, Richard Walker. There's a concept that Adam Curtis popularised called hyper-normalisation, and it's about how corporations, shored up by politicians, have actually kind of given up on the complex real world and have built a simpler fake world that they distract people with. Very frustrated, I see.
Okay, but we're almost out of time, so I'm so sorry. But do keep going, but you just need to finish your point.
We started with HS2. You could hardly say that was not moving away from a very difficult decision.
So it's like these priorities just seem like they are... Because it's like, why would these be... What is their strategy, It couldn't be this basic. But I think there's actually a strategy of this thing called hyper-normalisation, and they are kind of obscuring the reality with these, false, fake narratives, simple narratives.
On that note, our hour is up, I'm afraid. This could keep going, couldn't it, everybody? But anyway, our hour is up. If you can't stay up late, you can always watch us first on iPlayer. We're live on the iPlayer at 8 o'clock. I just want to say thank you very much to the suppliers of these pictures here, Celia Whiteside and Dennis Goff. Thank you very much for these pictures. From Question Time until next week when we're in London. Bye-bye.
Welcome to breakfast.
Thanks for joining us.
Good morning to you.
Great to have you.
Hello.